In our last video, we had mentioned that we would be putting coding inside of one of the 5 methods from the mouse listener interface. And the one method that we chose to actually put coding inside of was the mouse clicked method. All the other ones, the other 4, we're going to leave empty with just an open and close set of braces behind it. This is what you're going to want to put inside of the mouse clicked method. Public void mouse clicked, and it takes a mouse event E, just like all the other ones do. You're going to want to run an accessor method for the mouse event E. E.getX is the accessor method that allows you to get the X coordinate where the cursor was when the mouse was clicked. And E.getY is the accessor method that will allow you to get the Y coordinate where the cursor was when the mouse was clicked. Now, when you get these values, you've got to store them somewhere. So I'm going to have a variable which is going to be of integer type called myX, which is going to store the value that we get from the accessor method for the X coordinate. And I'm going to have another integer type variable, myY, which is going to store the value that we're getting for the Y variable from the accessor method. Then you're going to see one more line of code here at the end of mouse clicked, repaint. What repaint does is it calls the paint method again. Now, that sounds kind of weird, repaint. Remember that the main method in the JApplet runs the init method, and then it already ran paint once. So technically, by the time we get to the point where we're actually clicking a mouse, this is now at least the second time that paint's going to have to run. So that's why it's called repaint. And then you might wonder, why do we not have to pass it a graphics object here? The reason why you don't have to pass it a graphics object is that Java already created the graphics object, and you don't want to keep opening up new windows every single time that you want to paint. You're going to be making use of the graphics object that was already created the first time that Java ran paint. So repaint means we're going to run the paint method again using the graphics object that was already created. So the next thing that we're going to look at is what should happen inside of the paint method. So public void paint, we're returning nothing. Anybody can use this. The name of the method is called paint. There's that graphics object that it has for a parameter. We're going to do g.filloval, which we saw from our ball bounce program. We know that that's going to paint a circle or an oval. We're doing a couple interesting things here. Number one, instead of painting at the myX, my location, remember the job of this was to get the ball centered at where the cursor was. So the way that filloval works is it paints starting from the top left corner of the ball. We actually have to move the ball back and up 1 radius length. So we'll have to subtract the radius from the X coordinate, and we'll have to subtract the radius from the Y coordinate in order to get the ball centered at where the cursor was. And then for the width and for the height, you want double the radius in both of those directions, because the width of the ball should be the diameter, which is 2 times radius, and same thing for the height. Lastly, whenever a JApplet is run, the following script of method calls will happen in this order. First, the main program in JApplet will run the init method, which we're going to use to add the mouse listener. Then it will run a start method, which we're not actually going to be using in this code. So if the start method is not there, it'll just skip it. And then it's going to run the paint method one time. That means before we even click the mouse one time, the program's actually going to call the paint method. Now the problem is, in our paint method, we're going to be doing a g.filloval, and I think the user would be very confused if they see a ball suddenly pop up on the screen and they haven't even done anything yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to want the first time that paint is called to actually draw the circle off the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize the values of my X and my Y with negative numbers. Negative 100 for the X coordinate and negative 100 for the Y coordinate. And what that actually means, since 0, 0 is the top left corner of the screen, negative 100 would actually be further to the left and further up than the top left corner of the screen. So in other words, it'll draw a circle that we don't see. And the only other thing that we're going to do is we're going to set the size of the circle by initializing its radius. The radius is going to be an integer of 10 pixels wide. Remember, now that's the radius. That only goes halfway across the circle. A couple other things I'm going to do here, although we probably don't have to do it this way. I'm going to make this a static variable. So later on, if I did decide to make other circles, they would share the same radius. And the other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to make it final. And if you recall from chapter 4, that means that becomes a constant. So once I set this radius at 10 pixels, I'm not allowed to change that afterwards. So it's a static. That means all my objects of this class would share the same value. And final means that nobody can change this after we initialize its value at 10. So putting the whole thing all together, this is the final code for the mouse click program. Here's all my import statements. The first two are just for JApplets. The last one is for this event-driven programming. Public class mouse click extends JApplet, implements mouse listener. So we're extending off a JApplet. It means we get to use all the stuff that JApplet has. We're implementing mouse listener, which means we just made an agreement to write the 5 methods: mouse click, mouse press, mouse release, mouse entered, mouse exited. We're setting up our initial X and Y values to be off the screen at negative 100, negative 100. We're making our radius be 10 pixels, static final like we just discussed. The init method is going to add the mouse listener and tell it to respond to this current class. So when something happens with the mouse, notify this class, the mouse click class, that something has happened. Here's our paint method. That's going to be drawing a g.fill oval, my x minus the radius, my y minus the radius, so that we can get it centered instead of being at the top left corner. Radius times 2, that's the diameter of the circle for the width and the diameter circle for the height. Public void mouse clicked is the only one of these that we're actually going to be putting coding inside, where we will get the x coordinate and set it to my x, get the y coordinate, set it to my y, and repaint. And then here's the other 4 methods for the mouse listener interface: mouse press, mouse release, mouse entered, mouse exited. And you can see I have satisfied the requirement of writing these codes by putting in open close braces, but I have not putting anything inside of there. So that means my code won't be doing anything for any of these 4 actions of the mouse. I encourage you now to write this code, compile it, and run it. Now remember, when you run an applet, you're not going to be looking for void main like you do for applications. You're going to actually just run the applet. And what's going to happen when you run this code is, at first, you will not see anything on the screen. You will see a blank screen that Java's painting in, because the one circle that got painted is going to be drawn off screen at its initial x and y coordinates of negative 100, negative 100. What the program is waiting for you to do is it's waiting for you to move your cursor somewhere onto the screen where the painting is and click. And when you click, a circle will be drawn at that location. And then it waits again. And what's it waiting for? It's waiting for you to click the mouse again. So move the cursor and click again, and you'll see another circle get drawn. This is the idea of event-driven programming. The program's waiting for something to happen. And when that something happens, it springs into action and does whatever your code says to do, which in this case, when the mouse is clicked, we're going to get the x and y coordinates and repaint, which means we're going to draw another circle. So that is the whole idea of event-driven programming. So please write this code and give it a try.